The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Kerwin Gaines here, host of The Agenda. I am excited to have another repeat guest, someone who has been on the show now, I think 3 or 4 times. We're excited to have him here. None other than Mr. Charlie Copeland. We are going to talk about politics here in the state of Delaware. We're going to try to be cordial and respectful, and he always says that, I don't worry about it, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine. But we have found that you all love this conversation as well. So we're making sure that you have what you want here. There's a lot of topics that we want to talk about. All that being said, welcome, Mr. Charlie Copeland, to The Agenda.
Hey, Kerwin, thank you for having me once again.
Hey, welcome back. We're excited you're still taking our calls.
Yeah.
So it's an absolute plus to have you on the show. We have maybe about 10 things, maybe 8 or 9 things to talk about. I'm sure we'll have more. But I want to start off with the governor's race, give you a little bit of background in what I'm going after in regards to the governor's race. The first thing is The Agenda has had Matt Meyer on last week, and we're not talking about anything else, political, elections, whatever. We're talking about education. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, this isn't just because it's one Democrat supporting another Democrat. I think he has a firm grasp about what this state needs in regards to education. We have Mr. Mike Ramone will be on later this week. I'm not saying that he does not have a firm grasp on education, but I am equally concerned about what's next. Like I'm glad that both of the candidates understand and are eager to have this conversation. Neither one of them ran from us. In regards to this, both of them have ran to the microphone to say, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing on my first 100 days. This is what I'm planning on doing on day 1. This is how the Delawareans are going to benefit from these decisions. And granted, I think I didn't agree with everything that Mr. Meyer said, but I agree with a great deal of it. I would just like to see a firmer grasp on what we're doing in local districts in regards to bringing in contractors and programs to these school districts that aren't really giving us any true value, and then refunding them for other fiscal years moving forward just because they met grant standards or programmatic standards. Like, yeah, they were successful within the program, but were they successful in helping children, right?
Sure.
And how much, and I just want to be, and I know between freedom of information and other things, you can find out, but I don't think that school districts are being transparent enough in regards to these programmatics, because we're 1/3 of the state's budget is education. Mm-hmm. It's education. I think, man, Mr. Meyer said it was something almost $3 billion. I don't
$2
quote
billion.
Me. $2 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, don't
rounding,
quote me on
round
that,
numbers.
Rounding, but that's a lot of money, Charlie.
It is, for the number of students that we have, which is why we spend at, I think, the 6th highest level. So when somebody says to you, we need more money in education, well, we're already at the 6th highest level. So how much higher do you want to go? And by the way, our results are in the bottom 5.
Right. We're the fourth from the bottom.
Yeah, and there are people that spend more than us, Massachusetts, and they're number 1. So it isn't a money thing, because Massachusetts seems to be able to do it. So why can't Delaware?
So my thing, and I made it clear to friends, I've made it clear to family. Both my parents worked in the Christina School District for 30 years, 35 years apiece, so that's almost 70 years of experience. And we all sit around the dinner table, and my family who are still working for Christina and other school districts throughout the state, and I let them know, I don't want to spend another dollar on education, because we've spent enough and it's not working. And I don't know if that's a very blue thing to say, but it is how I feel, you know. And I know that there are a lot of other Democrats that feel that way, especially here, you know, in Newcastle County. Like, I cannot give another dollar to an unsuccessful school.
So, what would you do about it? So I guess the question might be, if I were governor, what would I do about education in the state of Delaware?
What would your day one plan be?
So I'm going to be a little circuitous about this, but do you know who W. Edwards Deming is?
I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
I am. So if you are the best manufacturer in Japan, and you get the award at the end of the year for being the best manufacturer, it is the W. Edwards Deming Award. It's not the Shinohara Award or the whatever, right? He was an American. He was an American industrial engineer who went to Japan after World War II and reconfigured all their industry and created what you see as Japan today with great manufacturing and automobiles and all this stuff, right? And he had 13 rules. And I'm going to just mention one of those rules. And one of his rules was about companies. And he said, 85% of the problems that companies face are problems of systems, not problems of people. The people are all good. Now, you may have a few, right? I mean, they're always a bad teacher or two, but they're generally good. So the system they're in stinks and doesn't let them perform. So if on day one, as governor, I would pull a Carney and I would declare an emergency. But not because of a head cold type of an illness. I would declare an emergency because thousands of students, thousands of children in our state are being ill-served and penalized in an education system that is not educating them, not preparing them for college, not preparing them for a job after high school, not preparing them for life.
Not even preparing them to get out of high school.
And so in the city schools, about 20 of them, the vast majority of them, have a single-digit proficiency. Only 1 out of 10 kids can read or do math or write.
Within standard.
And that's just proficient, though. That's not excelling or you're going to be the next CEO of company X. So they are being ill-served by a system. And if I were the governor, on day one, I would declare an education emergency in the state of Delaware. And I would take control of the whole thing. I would strip out just books of regulations, and I would say to the teachers and the principals, teach these kids. You're in the classroom with them every day. You know which kids are bright. You know which kids need help. Help them, the kids that need help, and with the bright kids, give them extra stuff to do so that they learn even more and get even brighter, as opposed to, well, we've got this rule that says I have to do this, and so I'm going to go, let the teachers teach, free them up. Years ago, this is 20 years ago, because I represented the Brandywine School District when I was in the state senate, and we asked at a public forum, if we got rid of a bunch of the regulations and laws around the district, could the district do more with less money? And the finance director at the time said, absolutely. And I don't believe that has changed. Matter of fact, I think it's worse today because every year the legislature and the Department of Education put in more regulations and more legislation and more overlay that keeps the teachers from doing what they're paid and want to do, which is teach. And you should and the principals, they were teachers, they came through the organization, they know what their schools are like. I went to private school. I never had a certified teacher in my life. I think I turned out okay. Now, you might quibble with that, and I understand that, but, I pay my bills, I get to work on time, I, brush my teeth and, take Geritol every morning, whatever, right? So I think that the vast majority of teachers, the vast majority of principals, the vast majority of parents and students know what they need and what they want, and if they worked together and didn't have some group down in the Department of Education or some group in Christiana at the headquarters telling them what to do, that you would see a significant increase in our educational outcomes.
I think I know the answer to this, but my other thing is I believe that the Department of Education needs to be rechartered.
Sure. Yeah. In the community education building, which is downtown here, and it has 2 charter schools in there, and then the CEB organization itself provides wraparound services. And in that, they've got student advocates that talk to the third grade students and say, okay, I'm going to work with you to make sure that you get to 5th grade. And when you get to 5th grade, you're on track to where you want to be down the road. And then in 5th grade, you have an advocate that says, what if instead of the 300, 400, 500 people that work in DOE down in Dover, instead of sitting there filling out papers and counting paper clips and this kind of stuff, what if they were distributed to the school districts with the other administrators who were administrating God knows what, and were said, you're now a student advocate. Here are your 10 students. You're meeting with them every week to make sure that they're on track. And I'm not trying to dictate from afar, because I think the schools themselves is where learning ought to happen, and where the decisions ought to be made as to what your student needs, what your child needs, what your grandchild needs, or what my child needs. It should be made at the school level, the teacher level. But if you had that advocate rather than a bureaucrat, I think you'd be adding to that assistance. Again, the advocates are in the CEB. They're in the school. They see the kids. They see the teachers. So it's not I'm remote an hour away, and I'm giving you these diktats as to what you should or shouldn't do. So I think we've got a central planned system, and central planning never works.
I'm just finding out more and more about what the Department of Education doesn't do versus what I was under the impression as a taxpayer, as a parent of kids that are currently in high school, and I had an expectation that the Department of Education did something. Did but you know what I mean?
I know.
Beyond set a standard, like, oh well, the DOE is going to come in here and fix it.
They have meetings,
and that's just not happening. That's just not happening. And I'm looking at this ball of Christmas lights that we currently have in this education system. We're giving it to the next governor and saying, here, good luck. But
declare a state of emergency on day one and bring in some outside experts from outside the state. Go to Massachusetts, for crying out loud. Go to Texas, where they've got school choice, and Arizona. Bring some people in and say, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this.
Spend money on smart people that understand this problem. Support them. Cut the bureaucracy.
And the thing about calling an emergency is
federal funding.
No, there's no statute on Delaware's books where the legislature can overturn a state of emergency. Once the governor declares one, they have to re-up it every 90 days. But every 90 days, you do what John Carney did 17 times, I think it was. Nope, still under emergency, still under emergency. Despite the fact that COVID by that time was long in the rearview mirror, we were still under a state of emergency, so they could do various things that they wanted to do. So I would, and by the way, it is hard to argue that our public education system here in Delaware is not in a state of emergency.
No, not only in a state of emergency, but a critical. I don't know if we could flash red or have a horn or a siren
on day one,
or something.
The new governor ought to walk up to a microphone and say, I'm really looking forward to my next 4 years here, but right now I got a lot of work to do on education. I'm declaring a state of emergency, and I'm bringing in these experts, and we're going to pull apart the Christmas tree light ball that's down there in the DOE building, and we're going to look at the districts and all the administrators we bring in on all of this time that are pushing paper and things like that, and we're going to go back to brass tacks, and we're going to make sure that teachers get to teach and students get to learn.
Yeah. So let's talk about the governor's race again. The Republicans have Mike Ramone. That is, again, he'll be on the show here this week. But some thinks that this race is already over. Your thoughts?
Well, if the race was already over, then we wouldn't even have to have the election, right? So the race does not always go to the swiftest of foot, nor the fight to the strongest. It is the way to bet. Now, that being said, Mike Ramone is a salt-of-the-earth person.
I think as a person, I like the guy. As a person,
has a bunch of small businesses, and he's been in the legislature, so he knows what the legislature is. He's been the leader of his caucus in the House, so he knows government. He knows how government works or does not work, and so I think that he is a good candidate. Delaware is a tough place, but honestly, Pete DuPont, who was elected governor back in 1980, and he said regularly, to run, you've got to run in bold primary colors. You can't be, pastels and wishy-washy and grays and
Makes
centrist
sense.
blues. You've got to be bold primary colors. And Delaware is in trouble. Delaware's in trouble. We've done some things to put baling wire and silly string on places, and we're going to move insight into the city, great stuff, and this kind of stuff. But that's not bringing new jobs to Delaware. You're just moving jobs from one part of Delaware to another part of Delaware. Yeah. They're going to expand. But AstraZeneca was expanding until they decided to change their business model, and they moved a bunch of people to Maryland. So you've got to have industries, and you've got to have growth. And you have to have a growth mindset. And Matt is a good guy, but during his tenure at Newcastle County, the government, the economy of Newcastle County has not grown. On an inflation-adjusted basis, the economy of Newcastle County has not grown. And I haven't seen necessarily a growth mindset.
It's just not under Matt's campaign.
Sure.
Tenure. It was not growing before him.
Oh,
as
absolutely.
Well.
Under Chris Coons, under Tom Gordon. I mean, basically, it stopped growing around 2000, which was just after the Unified Development Code was put in place. When you basically said that across the county, you're not allowed to develop your property to make money or to do anything else with it. Once people who own property can't develop it, then oddly enough, economics stops to grow. And the city of Wilmington's been in this crisis for even longer than that, where the rules and regulations make it so difficult to start and grow a business that it's just easier to go somewhere else.
We had Marcus Henry on the show, and he made it very clear that land use and how to better use and regulations and all these other things in regards to the county and passing that through is one of his major.
Yeah. I mean, we have a housing crisis, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do you solve it? Build more housing.
Houses, right? Well,
but I'm not allowed to.
yeah.
And by the way, even with the housing you have, even California does this. You could have ADUs. So here's an additional dwelling unit. So I'm going to take my garage, or I'm going to take something out back, and I'm going to put a dwelling unit there, and I can rent that out. One, I can make a little money. Two, it gives a place for somebody to live, and the economy improves.
Some of that is done in the county. It's just not done readily. It's not done as often as we would like it, and there are some things.
Should be countywide.
Yeah, and there are some things that can stop that. But I still believe that next to education, economic development is huge for Delaware. We are not what we used to be. I know you're the numbers guy, and you can tell us why we're not what we used to be in regards to economic development. But I just really feel as though I live in an area that is stagnant. The best part about my job as a consultant, I get to see the country regularly. And I don't look at the St. Louis Arch. I don't look at all the other great sites like the Grand Canyon. I look at the main streets and the major thoroughfares, especially in Texas and California and all these other things. You don't have as many chain stores.
Right.
You have a lot of individual stores like Copeland and Gaines' Tire Center, and the NTB isn't in there.
Right.
Because they have made it available for these small companies to do that, whether that's through funding or just making business easier. And I see so much more of those in other places. And I can't figure out, for the life of me, why we can't figure that out.
So 15 years ago, again, when I was in the Senate, I had a guy in my district who bought a garage, to do auto repair. And he bought an existing garage. And all of a sudden, the county inspectors came out to check the height of his sign. He's like, Charlie, I just put a new thing in the sign, giving my name, not the other guy's name.
Right.
And then the county inspectors come out and say, you have the wrong kind of mulch in the beds around the property. It's like, I didn't do anything to the mulch. And then they came out and they said, your shed isn't tied down properly. And he said, he said, why do they keep coming after me? Well, and so I called Chris Coons, who was the county executive at the time. And I was like, what are you doing to this guy? Because we drove through the district and we found 5 other sheds that are not tied down properly and mulch everywhere that was exactly like his. And he didn't touch the sign. Why are you going after him? Well, he said, well, we've got so many regulations on the books, we can't inspect them all, so we just do it when we get called, and so somebody's been calling us. So in other words, somebody's trying to harass this guy out of business. Meanwhile, as I said to Chris at the time, I said, well, why don't you get rid of some of the regs on the book then? Because if you can't enforce them, that's arbitrary and capricious. It allows one citizen to target another, or a county person who doesn't like somebody to target their business. And it makes, that's called corruption, by the way.
Yeah, it
is. And you can stop it by not having regulations on the books that you can't afford to actually inspect.
So would this be part of your day one plan as well, or your first 100 days in your statement that you would make?
One of the 2 successful things that Donald Trump did in his first term was he got rid of more regulations. He said before you put it,
he said that he was going to.
And he did. They got rid of about a dozen regulations for every regulation they put in place. And you could do that in the state of Delaware. We have over 33,000 regulations for chemical companies. We used to have a lot of chemical companies in the state. We don't anymore. But we still have those regulations.
But how is
every business,
is that detrimental to the current chemical
because
companies? Because
other businesses are in place that now have to live by regulations that were drawn up 30 years ago. And so some regulator can come along and say, hey, by the way, you got the wrong mulch, and therefore I'm fining you whatever. and you got to go handle that, and it's just, it's a drag on, and you multiply that 33,000 times across the 25,000 small businesses in the state of Delaware, and it screeches economic development to a halt. And you don't have that in Florida. You don't have that in Texas. You don't have that in South Carolina or Georgia.
I have to agree with you. Some of those states that you named, I mean, especially Florida, I spent a lot of time there. It's different.
And by the way, the 30% of our outbound migration.
Now, don't get me wrong, Florida's a little
going
crazy,
to right, but they're going to South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Texas. Another 20% is going to the West Coast. And West Coast, they're paid more, but their quality of life, their cost of life is much higher than here. But people are going out there because they want to do tech jobs, or they want to have a different lifestyle than this sort of, frankly, depressing Northeast lifestyle. And by the way, again, as you know, I love this state. I love this country. And the only reason I'm here talking to you is because I think we can be better.
Yeah. So from a party standpoint, how do you feel about the Republican Party right now in the state of Delaware? Do you feel that it's strong? I know that for me to have you say otherwise is probably not going to happen.
Well, you never know, because I say crazy things sometimes. They happen to be right, but they may be crazy.
But right now, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that the Republican Party is strong in the state of Delaware.
So my complaint with the party, not some of our candidates, we have some really
apologies
strong,
to Julianne Murray, because I know she's saying, Kerwin, I can't believe you said that.
We have some really strong candidates. What I think the party has missed is that the state party's job is to help Republicans in the state of Delaware get elected. So when I was the party chair, I focused on how do and since you don't have a lot of statewide elected officials, somebody's got to stand up and say, this is going wrong in Delaware, this is going wrong in Delaware, and by the way, this is going right in Delaware, but you're the voice of the opposition. But our state party, most recently, has just been sort of a Trump mouthpiece and saying, oh, Biden this or Biden that or Kamala Harris this or Kamala Harris. And that's fine, right? I mean, those of us who are on the Republican side, we think that's funny, ha, ha, ha. But the bottom line is that's not helping Mike Ramone. What helps Mike Ramone is showing that Newcastle County's economy has not grown. What helps Mike Ramone is showing that the education system in the state of Delaware, under decades of Democrat rule, has failed. The economic growth, the corrections. I mean, you can go down the line of the areas in Delaware with the high costs of power in Delaware. The fact that we're going to mandate everybody buy electric vehicles in a decade, and we don't even have those cars. We don't even have those cars. It is true. The guys went around and did the state. There is a mandate by 2030. But my point is that is what the party should be pointing out. And you can have the argument. You can say, Charlie, that's not true. It's this, that, or the other thing. Fine. But let's have the discussion.
Right.
But if all we're doing is saying, Biden is a wafty old man, okay. But does that help Mike Ramone? Does that help win seats in the state House? Does that help win seats in the state Senate? The answer is no, it doesn't.
Right. So while we're talking about that in our final minutes here, let's take a look at the election. It's very, very close. I know, and deep in my heart, that Kamala's going to win this election. I know that you may not think so, you may disagree with that, but I have a feeling that she is going to be the next president of the United States.
So, I'm a numbers guy, as you know. So feelings have nothing to do with it. You can feel whatever you want, dude. I'm all, if we want to have like one of those moments and do deep breathing and get in touch with our feelings, that's all good. But the bottom line is the person who wins the election has more electoral votes than the other person.
Right.
And that's going to come down to 7 states. And out of that, it's going to come down to maybe 12 counties. And out of that, it's going to come down to 5,000 voters in each of those counties. Total of about 100,000 people across the country are going to determine the race. Delaware's not going to determine the race. Delaware's already pretty much, we know what's going to happen.
Right.
We don't know the margin, but we know what's going to happen. And the margin in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona and Georgia, those are the places that it's going to matter.
And they're very thin margins.
And they're very close.
Very, very thin margins, but I still believe in common sense, and I believe that she is the common sense candidate. I know that you don't feel that way.
My common sense would lean elsewhere.
I know that you don't feel that way, but I really believe that she's the common sense candidate. When will this, with Trump, this attitude, name-calling nonsense just stop and stick to the issues?
So Trump is a reasonably older guy, right? He was 78?
Yes.
So how many 78-year-olds do you know that are radically changed their personality, other than having an accident?
You get who you get, but not. I don't know.
So the answer to your question is never.
I don't know many 78-year-olds that are vying for a position to be the mouthpiece for the free world.
And by the way, if there weren't large tranches, almost 50%, perhaps even more than 50% of the American voter interested in him, he wouldn't even be close, right? So the bottom line is you have a largely equally divided nation. And so to a certain extent, it's a coin flip, and that's going to come down to election day turnout, and the turnout for the extended voting and things like that in those very, very narrow, small places.
So you can have who I know who you would like to win, but you can tell me here, it's just me and you. Forget the camera. Who's going to win the election, Charlie?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea.
Who do you foresee winning the election?
I can't say it any other way. I have no
sad state of affairs,
idea.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I have no idea.
You don't have a deep down
I do
gut.
not. None. Zip. I have no idea, because it is going to come down to areas. Look at it this way. I have friends in the southern part of the state, and it's a very Republican area.
It is.
And they're all fired up, right? And then they talk to me, and they're like, and I'm like, we're gonna take Delaware. We're gonna take Delaware. And I'm like, let me go back to the numbers, right? I'm a numbers guy, right? And so, and by the way, that doesn't mean they're wrong. We could. Right? Something strange. I mean, we know that Israel and Iran are on the edge of war. We know that the ports are closing down.
Why can't we just say that they're wrong?
Well, no, but because things happen, right? If to catch lightning in a bottle, you have to have a bottle, and then you got to have lightning. And
I don't think this is the storm.
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I hope that whatever happens in the Middle East happens quickly, and that it doesn't turn into a global conflagration.
I honestly don't think that in our last minute of conversation here, I don't think that the Middle East is going to resolve in a way that we're expecting to. That's just my defense knowledge. But all in all, I think that it's hard to stop a movement. It's easier to stop a country. It's easier to stop a government. But when you have a movement, and you kill the leaders of the movement, it isn't like a snake. You're not taking the head off the snake when it comes to a movement. All you're doing is inciting that movement even more. And now, because of their resources are smaller, they're being more selective in regards to how they move. But
I've never lived in the Middle East. I don't know too many people that are high-level government officials in the Middle East. Those people have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. So I have no idea how that's going to play out. All I know is that what the Israelis have been able to do over the last 2 weeks have surprised the hell out of everybody, most notably Iran.
Right.
And
it's shown Iran.
And so how that plays out, I believe it was Henry Kissinger at some point, but it could have been Zbigniew Brzezinski under the Carter administration about some international incident, and they were telling the president, they said, you have to do something, because no matter what you do, it will be wrong, including doing nothing.
Right.
So in other words, there's going to be action. It's probably going to be like arm waving, because other things are going to affect this in ways that who knows. But then you overlay that with the storm in North Carolina, the ports shutting down. I mean, there are a lot of things going on right now that are going to be tough on the country. We're a big country. We're a flexible country. We'll get through all of it. But in the next 60 days, that can have an impact on these 100,000 people who are going to decide the next election.
Before we go off the air tonight, my bet, the ports will resolve in 10 days.
Still, early voting started.
We want to say thank you to Charlie Copeland for coming on the agenda tonight. Thank you so much for your banter, your ideas. Hopefully you will come back again.
You bet.
But
if you'll have me.
We'll definitely have you. We look forward to seeing you all next week right here on the agenda. Please tune in. Until then, I'm Kerwin Gaines.